In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, the TheFireStore has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Carnes for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit thefirestore.com today. The TheFireStore, your trusted safety partner.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatefabrics.com/Flex 7.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with Magnegrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit Magnegrip.com.
Hey, out there in Blog Talk Radio Land, a happy holiday season to every one of you. On behalf of my co-host Michael Dugan, David Rhodes and Diane Rothschild, Fire Engineering, and all the folks who bring so much good stuff to this world from Fire Engineering and FDIC. Our sincere hope is that as we come into your living rooms or your podcasts or heaven forbid, your bedrooms, wherever it is that you're listening to us, man. I sure hope life's good for you. And wherever this finds you today, our sincere hope is that you'll find some good stuff in our wonderful guest. And it's our privilege. And Mike and I never, ever take for granted the fact that you're taking some of your valuable life to come and listen to what we have to say. But more importantly, what our guests who, are amongst the brightest and best in the nation and the fire service have to say. So it's a privilege and honor to be riding with you, man, to be riding the trail as fire service professionals. And no more privilege for me than to be with the man, the myth, the one and only Captain Michael Dugan. Michael, what in the world is going on, my friend?
Just getting ready for the holidays, brother. Getting ready for my little one gets home from Denver Sunday morning. She says she'll take the train home from Kennedy Airport at 5:30 in the morning. And I said, no, I will be there. You're not going to Jamaica at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. No. So that's the the dad, I know Benjamin's also got two little girls, I think. I got two big girls now. My little one's going to be 30 in February, but they're still my babies, and they'll be my babies for the rest of their lives. So I'm going to go, do what I got to do. So
yes, Emily's going to be riding the D train, the daddy train, right?
Yep. So, but it's all good. The holiday's going to be great. We're looking forward to it, and had a great Thanksgiving. So it's all good, brother.
Good, man. Well, good. Well, let's dive right into this thing, Michael, because we want to keep it on time. As those of you who have listened to us for, Mike, how long has this been going on?
At least 10 years. What?
10 to 15 years, yeah?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I can probably look at my folder of all the radio questions I have from all of the different things and go back to one and try to figure out when the start was. But I have the old where we had to talk on the fire with we had to go on to blogtalkradio.com and
Yeah.
sign in and everything else.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable.
Well, folks, even though we're recording it now, I know there's flashy webcasts and podcasts and professional, commercials and everything. From Mike and I, you just get a couple of old captains, no flash, no dash. Just here's our hope, and it has been the same since we agreed to do this thing, 15 years ago. We're going to do our best to bring you the brightest and best in the fire service, and we're going to let them talk. And Mike and I are comfortable talking, for those of you who know us. So we'll add some insight today, but our goal and our desire is for you to hear from our good friend, Dr. Benjamin Martin. And Ben, I've had such good interactions and time spent with Ben. He's one of those guys that it's wonderful when I finally get a chance just to hang out with him, and I feel like I go away from my conversations and my times with him better than when I entered those conversations. I think you're going to find some thoughtful, really thoughtful, just nuanced and impactful leadership ideas, and everything he touches makes you think about it in a different way. It reminded me a little bit of like when I would have conversations with Bobby Halton or with Alan Brunacini. Those guys would always expand my mind a little bit, and I feel that way with Ben. And so we've been trying to get him on, and now it's a privilege to actually expose our listeners to Dr. Benjamin Martin. That's kind of cool. Let me read the bio here, and I'm going to do a shorter version, but Dr. Benjamin Martin founded EmbraceTheResistance.com, all one word, to give leaders something different. Real talk, real tools, real strategies. He has written the articles. He has taught at classes and conferences across the nation, up to and including this year also accepted to FDIC. Yeah. So his main class, he teaches on a lot of different things, which we're going to go over that stuff. But his main class that he's known for is intoxicated leadership. So we're going to get a chance to talk about intoxicated leadership today. He's currently an executive officer and acting battalion chief with the Henrico County Division of Fire in Virginia. And let me just tell you, from somebody who can be maybe critical at times of what goes on the national stage, he's a squared away dude, cool dude, legitimate dude. I'm excited to have Ben on the podcast today because I think you're going to get some things in a different way than you've heard them from somebody who's paid the price and is doing the stuff for real. So, Ben, Doctor, my man, welcome to the Mikey G and Mikey D show. We are honored to have you aboard, my friend.
Thank you guys so much. That is probably the nicest lead-in I've ever gotten, and certainly Halton and Brunacini are definitely names that I would be happy to be even in a corner of the room that those guys were standing in. And I also let's just set the tone for what we're going to talk about. It really is a privilege to have both of your time and the audience's time. I can just fall on the sword right now. I have made mistakes along the leadership journey where I've walked in a room and I didn't have an audience. I had 4 or 5 men and women looking at me, waiting for orders, needing guidance, but they weren't hearing or listening to me because I didn't have a relationship, I didn't have credibility, I had made mistakes. So anytime there's one butt in the seat, one set of ears to hear anything, it really, really is a privilege. So thank you guys very much.
Yeah, well, dude, we're honored to have you, and let's jump right in because we got a host of cool things to talk about. So let's start at the top. EmbraceTheResistance.com. So you are known for that kind of that title, Facebook postings, social media postings, certainly your website, the Fireground Commander Conference that you essentially brainchild and are running. Talk about Embrace the Resistance and what that means to you and what it should mean to our listeners.
Oh, well, thank you for asking about that. I think at its simplest, it was just my first attempt to try to get my thoughts out of my head and down on paper. I experienced some early success, and then I very quickly experienced some early failures. And when the failures came, I was really looking around. Mark Van Appen's a really good friend, a great mentor, but I didn't know him well at all, really, when I struggled. So I read his writing, I would read books, and a lot of the material that I was reading felt like it was presenting from the top of the mountain. And I was trying to figure out how to keep from sliding down the mountain at the time. And so the first article I ever wrote was called Legacy versus Impact. And it was basically me writing to me as if I had the ability to go back in time and prevent all the heartache that I was experiencing because I had fallen in love with the job and was putting it before my family. And I had confused in my mind impact at work with legacy. And the crux of the article that I sent that seemed to start resonating, that encouraged me to keep writing, was that work wasn't the place for legacy. Work was the place to have impact. Legacy was a gift and inheritance of my values and my thoughts and ways and beliefs of navigating the world. And it really kind of dawned on me that I was pursuing the wrong angle when I would say things like, they're going to remember me for this at work. And yet, looking back, I can't remember holding my kids much when they were infants. And I was like, what a waste. Because I can't name the first fire chief we had in our organization. I can't name the first five. And there are things that I gave up time with my family on that have already changed, and I'm still with my own department. I don't recognize, they've erased my fingerprints off those things. And luckily, I was able to come to that revelation early enough that I've still have that opportunity, because as Dugan said, I've got a 13, 11-year-old girl, and that's pretty cool. Captain and active battalion chief is cool. Doctor is cool, really cool. Daddy and father, and husband, way more. And I still struggle with it, if I'm being honest. I really do, because this is easy to love and do. So I started writing about that. It resonated. So then I was like, maybe I could be a little bit different if I just talked about the struggles and the insecurities and the vulnerabilities of leadership. Some of those successes saw me go down rabbit holes of depression, weight gain. That's where I had my first round of marriage counseling. I think that's called foreshadowing. And so I just kept writing, and wherever I got the chance, kept talking. And Bobby was one of those people who gave me a chance early on, was great about giving me some feedback and challenged what I thought, and really set the stage early on for the humility that needs to come with this, that I might have things that I think are unique and novel, but at the end of the day, somebody's probably thought about them and said them. There's not much new in the fire service unless you're doing something cool like the Air Coalition, or your name's Dennis Laguerre and your brain is massive. And most of us are just recycling, and we're not actually manufacturing anything neat. So I started the website, I started writing, and Embrace Resistance actually came from my time in training. And we were teaching nozzle mechanics. And in our department, we'll hire anybody, whether you got experience or not, as long as you meet the certain criteria. And it was always fun for me to let people experience that safely, where they got it, the first real, oh crap, this is happening kind of thing with nozzle whip and reaction. And I had a kid that I gave it to him, and he didn't open it. And I was like, this is where you open the nozzle. And he's like, if I don't open this nozzle, then I don't have any nozzle reaction. I don't have any resistance. And he was being clever. And I got it. It was funny to laugh at. So then he opened it, and he had the same reaction, that most people do, oh crap. But I was thinking about it that evening, and I realized, I'm going to spend the next 4 or 5 months with this guy and everybody else in our academy, teaching them tips and tricks to displace that reaction, to anticipate it. We know scientifically it's happening. We ought to do the same things for leaders. Because when we make decisions, that's no different than opening that nozzle. When we're trying to apply leadership like the tool that a nozzle is, and we make a decision, if you're deciding, you have a group on one side of haves and a group on one side of have-nots, and there's going to be a reaction, predictably. And if we had tips and tricks and strategies for learning how to anticipate and even displace that reaction from our leadership decisions, I think we would have more leaders who would actually do their jobs. Because a lot of the observations and what pushed me to take on leadership, probably honestly before I should have, because I got promoted about 7 years on, about 9 years total, because I volunteered before, is I was tired of watching people in ranked positions do nothing for their people. And a lot of that came from, to be fair to them, they had tried and they experienced those reactions, and they didn't have any leadership development, and they didn't like how it felt. And so they'd stopped making decisions, at least the gray ones. They do the black and white stuff that's easy, policy's got their back. But you put them in the gray, they would drown. And so they were basically tombstones. You could see, rest in place, because they didn't retire. They didn't go anywhere. They didn't want to give up the money or the status. So they stayed and did nothing. And I got tired of seeing our young folks struggle with that. And I dealt with that when I was early on in my career too. So the whole idea of embrace resistance was like, I would not tolerate anyone on the fire ground who was great at stretching a hose line and refused to open the nozzle. So I don't care how great you are in the firehouse, how great you are in the fire ground. If you're going to get in a ranked position and make it and not make decisions because you're afraid of those reactions, you're no good to me. And I can't have you in my firehouse. I can't. But it's not fair to just wash our hands of that. And so that was the idea, was like, let's get real. Let's talk about it and see where the conversation goes from here. And what a journey that has been. Because I try to find the rooms where I'm not the smartest person. Don't let the doctor fool you. And you've been very gracious enough to be many times the set of ears that I needed to bounce something off of, and many times the set of lips that gave me the words I need to hear. And so together we do this. Just goes faster, I think, on a hose line when you have more than one person stretching and flowing it. So that's what we're trying to do here, I think.
Very cool. Very cool. So you're known for talking about interpersonal aspects of leadership with your well-known class, Intoxicated Leadership, Thinking Strategically and Reacting Emotionally. Tell us about the class and what are some of your key insights from that? Because I love the title.
Well, thank you. I always like when I started, you can imagine, I don't think I ever had to teach against you and the mics, but I definitely had to teach against Champ and other well-known like strategy and tactics, meaty topics. Or you could come see me and talk about emotions and feelings. And it's like, on that. So this is true. Like, it started as a class about conflict management, and I used to play videos from The Apprentice as loud as I could at the breaks. So all you would hear is screaming coming down the hallway. So at least you'd pop your head in and catch the class title, maybe be like, well, maybe this is different. Maybe I'll sit in. And it didn't work, but I tried. And the whole idea of it came from one of those early and unfortunately one of my largest mistakes. And to keep it short, I mishandled an interpersonal relationship. It was a damned if I do, damned if I don't. There's no great outcome, but I made mistakes that I still am working to fix, and I'll never have the opportunity to fix the interpersonal dynamics between that individual and I, which makes me sad. And it would only be truly a tragedy in my mind if no one else learned from it, or if I didn't help. And so when I started doing the research for the class, trying to figure out like, how is it, if you've ever seen that movie 12 Angry Men, that we had a battalion chief, myself, my captain, because I was a lieutenant at the time, and the employee all screaming at each other. None of us like really even understanding at the end of like what we were there to do, which was to help that other individual and to love that person and to steward their career, even if they were trying to cut us in the face and stab us in the back along the way. And I betrayed that opportunity that comes with this leadership by leaning into the feel good of like, you deserve this. Like, this is the medicine. You're going to take this. And the next time we had a chance to talk, he initiated it, and he goes, I don't appreciate you signing this document and putting it in my box at the station. And it was his learning plan. And I was like, what do you mean signing it on your behalf? Basically forging it. I was like, that's your signature. And he's like, I didn't sign this. I've never seen this before. And I was like, what do you remember? And as he played back the events, he's got a 2-hour gap in his memory from a 3-hour meeting, which was only supposed to be 30 minutes. And that was fascinating to me as much as it was disturbing. And I had worked and gotten a degree on the fire science side because I was like, I'm a firefighter. I want to be good and know my job. And I think this would help. And then I went and got my master's because I was like, if I'm going to move up and grow up in the organization, I need to have a head about the business side of this. But that really threw me for a loop. I was like, I think I got a lot of work to do on the people side. And that's what got me into the industrial psychology piece, which was basically the study of people at work, like all the hopes and dreams and morale and engagement they have, recruitment, retention, hiring, firing, leadership conversations, all that stuff. Like everything that happens on the fireground and in the firehouse, ironically enough, is the same because you got one brain that's guiding all of that, one nervous system to take in information and guide your muscles as you're enacting stuff. And the more that I studied it, the more I understood it, I was like, well, you basically got a part of your brain that acts the same way when it's drunk. And it leads you to do things you wouldn't normally do. It leads you to say things you wouldn't normally do. And you got no memory, or you have an altered memory. of it. And that's when you talk about things like emotional tagging and the prefrontal cortex and all the stuff that is interesting to me, not necessarily to everybody else, but the application of it and the impact is huge. And the more I studied it, the more I realized like there's a reason we have he said, she said, or we have two sides to a story. And if I told you that both of you are right, would you know why that is? Or I can understand why we have tunnel vision and auditory exclusion on the fire ground. Do we ever think about how that impacts us in interpersonal conversations where we literally can't hear each other, or tunnel vision would lead me to not see your body language? And unfortunately, nonverbal communication is 93% of the message. So now talk to me about, should you send that email? Should you send that text message if you're the fire chief? Do you have an option? And the last 7, 8 years of teaching this class, I learn as much as I give. And what I'm really trying to challenge is this title of leadership, where like I think it's much like money. You give money to somebody who is naturally generous, and they're going to be more generous. You give somebody that's a miser money, they're going to be a Scrooge. Same thing. If I promote somebody and continue promoting somebody that all they do is take that opportunity to turn around and give to other people, like promoting the senior firefighter who's always out working with the rookie, learning how to work the equipment and the apparatus, that's the individual who's going to return that investment tenfold. And really, at least locally, is where I started trying to change the narrative of what it means to lead. And that's the concept that we've got on the intoxicated leadership side is if you show up to the class, we're going to talk about the patterns of people. And I joke about like we'll do lots of, we call it fire porn here, where we'll watch lots of videos of buildings burning down and just like, how would you put that out? How would you handle that? And everybody does their quarterbacking and offers their opinions. And then you stick a video of a interpersonal interaction in their face and they're not interested, or they're even uncomfortable, or you ask them to role play something. They're like, and you're like, these are the vegetables, guys. And you can't grow up to be a strong fire service leader if you won't eat your vegetables. And then usually by the end of the class, people are coming up and saying stuff like, this is going to help my relationship with my kids, my wife. And if you remember the old Rogaine commercials, like this is why I teach the class. Like I am a client of the product, continuing as much as I am the teacher and the owner of it, meaning I'm modeling and reliving the importance of my message every day, because I don't always handle things well. Even when we're emotional, which is the whole thing, you can think strategically or you can react emotionally. Like we can show you the science of where the brain goes in your blood, just like you're doing all these bicep curls. You're not growing your legs, which is your foundation. And it's the same thing when we talk about the emotional intelligence aspect of stuff. And it's been fun to watch this thing go and hear the questions and see like where people clue in. I always enjoy walking around peeping at people's notes to see what's registered with them. But that's the kind of stuff that I hope to see. We watch a lot of videos and then you're just kind of learning to read people and anticipate stuff. And then you get to put yourself in a situation. How would you handle it? How would you embrace that resistance, so to speak? And then repeat and go from there.
Well, you mentioned that your doctorate is in industrial and organizational psychology, IO psychology. So here you go, Doc. You got two knuckle dragon captains here. Tell us what the heck you mean by that term, and I guess more importantly, you mentioned where does it touch the shore of the average cat like us that are just trying to do a good job out there?
I think the best way that I can describe it in the time that we have is it is the science of what you already know. Like I tell people, I don't think I'm putting any new stars in the sky to guide and navigate people. But I do think I'm drawing constellations and naming them with the ones that are already there. And so what I mean by that as an example is the fire chief that we currently have used to be my operational assistant chief. And when I was an acting battalion chief in the field, he'd come by in the evening and I'd be like, hey, why don't you tell me about what's going on at station such and such and such and such and such and such. And he's like, oh, you've already heard about that. I said, no, I haven't heard anything. That's why I asked you. He's like, well, how did you know where I was? And I said, well, I like to watch you on the map in the morning. And I was like, those were the first 3 stations you went to. And he's like, well, why? What about the ones in the afternoon? And I was like, I don't care about the ones in the afternoon. And he's like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, let me ask you a question to answer your question. Why are you here at 8:30 at night? When will you come to see me at 8 o'clock in the morning? Like you did those places. And he goes, honestly, he's like, I'm tired. I said, yeah, that's called emotional labor. when you have to have a conversation with someone that you disagree with, politics, beliefs, attitudes, or you just genuinely don't like or respect, you consciously and sometimes even subconsciously have to do a great effort, especially when you're in a leadership position, to mask all those nonverbals so that you don't give away the poker face, so to speak. And that takes energy. It literally uses up your blood glucose. So I talk like you can talk to an idiot and end up in a diabetic coma. And you probably have felt that way after talking with folks or checking a lot of emails where like my head hurts and this doesn't feel good. Like it literally physically doesn't feel good. And that is what that is. So what I've been able to develop is basically a language that explains the events that are already happening, that have been happening, and are going to continue to happening. And because we're, at least in our own organization and hopefully nationally, developing a language, it's no different than anybody putting out a term. Like if you don't know how to label an event and describe what to expect from it, then how could you teach how to react from it? So we've got terms like single family dwelling or taxpayers or whatever jargon you're using. And it's the same thing. Like we're trying to take all the stuff that the academics understand. And the only reason they understand it is because they talk to the practitioners. And academics love to talk to fire departments because what we do is crazy when you think about it. And a lot of some of the best models in psychology have come from studying firefighters and leaders dealing with emergencies. And so it's not uncommon for me to weigh in on stuff at a very high organizational level to say, this is what you're seeing and this is why it's happening. And then giving them the ability to then go out and do what they're going to do. Like I don't tell them what to do. I'm just helping make sense of what they're saying. And if you want to avoid 5 years of having to study, just use your cliches. Things we've talked about already. You know, I say one thing, it goes in one ear and out the other. That's auditory exclusion. He said, she said. That's your memory distortion because you guys are remembering events differently, because you're emotionally tagging things based on their significance to you differently. And it's been really interesting to watch and advise and consult and give people like, have you ever thought about doing this instead of this? Like just as an example, then we'll move on. One of the things that I go out and teach when I'm talking more to fire chiefs is I talk about what's your alternate ending in your messaging. And so what I talk about is Hollywood will spend millions of dollars filming an ending they never intend to release. And they'll show it to a whole group, make them sign the NDAs, and they'll do qualitative data review and they'll say, how did you feel? It's not like how long was the movie? What was your average attention span? They're clocking that too, but they want to know, were you entertained? Were you interested? Like what moments? They'll ask you questions and they really want to know about the feeling and experience. And based on that feedback, they will release whatever ending they think is best, even if it wasn't the one they originally thought. So we've talked about in our own organization and with others about like, do you have a group that you trust that you show two different messages to? And then you ask them, how do you feel about it? And you ask for clarification and you work with them at all ranks. I'm not talking about just deputy chiefs sitting in a room. I'm talking about like end users from the newest person all the way up to see how they feel and then deciding based on that. Maybe we don't even go this route. Maybe it's not an email. Maybe we cascade it with in-person visits, or maybe we give a reference point that people can access on our SharePoint page. And then we tag team it with these interpersonal visits to see how it's going. Or we send it out on a different day of the week to give them more time to process, to keep the admin folks in the office. I've always loved how we send promotional lists out on Friday evening and then everybody goes home. And there's nobody there to monitor the reactions except the people in the field. And a lot of them don't know why the decision was made in the first place. So it's things like that that have been really interesting to watch. And it's all the way from systems to interpersonal aspects. And one that I've really enjoyed is that we don't talk about a lot about is the intrapersonal. It's this voice. And the best way to think about it is if I ask you guys, like, if I took this inner monologue, the one that tends to light up at night, thinking about all your worries and anxieties, and I was able to manifest a physical person with that voice, would you be friends with that person based on how they talk with you? And you'd be surprised the number of times people go, no, I wouldn't. So can we have a cop? You know, and that's something I'm currently struggling with based on this admin stuff, because it's not uncommon for me to work 50, 60 hours a week because I care and I'm trying to solve pinch points. Is I suck at setting boundaries. I suck at showing myself love. And I sacrifice my goals, my wants, my needs, my time with my family to move the organization along. And now we got to go back to 2017 and talk about impact versus legacy. And so all these things come together and it's just like a circus tent. There's no show without poles pushing up the tent. And there's no show if there's not any guy wires pulling resistance against the pole. It's push-pull. It works. That's what makes the show. So the interpersonal dynamics, there's push, there's pull. That's conflict, but that's also mentoring and growth. And it's the same thing with your systems. You make a change over here, you got to understand how it's affecting over there. And the last thing I'll say, and then before I shut up, is it's mayonnaise and jumbo jets, which I don't know if I ever shared this one with you, Mike. Hopefully you like this one. And it's not novel, but it really resonates with me. Complicated versus complex. Jumbo jets are very complicated things to build, as you can imagine. But there's training and there's certifications. And more importantly, there's manuals. And it's easy to build something. It's hard to maintain it. And if the AC goes out on that jumbo jet, somebody is paid to be on call to go fix that thing. And they know if they take these 4 screws out this panel, they can replace this part where they knew where to order it from, and they can fix it. It's complicated. Mayonnaise is complex. There's very few ingredients in mayonnaise, depending on which one you buy and how organic you want to be. I know you're on the West Coast, so yeah, I'm sure you're the hippie type out there. I see the guitars and the lava lamps, which I love. I got a lava lamp going on back there for you. But once you mix those few ingredients, you can't unmix them, and that's systems and organizations. Once you enact something, like, and here's a cliche, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And that's in how you handle conflict as much as it is whether you send that email or not. And people are always registering feelings about things. And unpacking those feelings is the mayonnaise. And the longer I get on, because I've got almost 2 decades now in this department, the more I realize what the senior men and women were going through when I started. And it's just one more humbling experience of I'm looking for a place where I feel valued, and at a point in my career where I should be the most valuable. They've invested 20 years with me. And sometimes I struggle to connect with that. And I don't think I'm alone in that. So it's just one of the seasons I'm experiencing that we'll start putting into the writing, like that artificial experience piece I sent you, and hoping help people not have the same sense of entitlement and, artificial confidence that I had when I started, where I thought I knew it all. So hopefully that's the 30,000 foot view of IO, as it makes sense to you guys.
Very good. And I like that. So now this is a very interesting question to me. Do you find that your academic knowledge tends to either complement or contradict what you've experienced on the fire ground, and more importantly to me, in the firehouse?
So I think it's both. And here's what I mean by that. So I've already told you about, like, a lot of what I learned, the science wise, just validates what you guys already know, what you've earned with your hard knocks and dragging those knuckles. So I do think it complements that. Now, where I get in trouble, where I've always gotten in trouble, even before I had the doctor, is when I speak up. So I see things happening that the academic background says no, and not just no, it's like a hell no. And this happened 3-4 years ago, where our previous fire chief decided maybe it's even been 5 years almost, decided right smack dab in the middle of COVID that now is the time to reorganize the fire service, our department. I'm going to take the middle managers, the station captains out, where our organization, they oversaw all 3 shifts. And those are your communication pathways. That's your accountability. That's your responsibility. That's your mentoring. That's your coaching. He had no idea how valuable these people were. And to the point that he would tell, like, somebody like me to my face, like, I'm not paying captains to do the lieutenant's job, because that's what he saw them. He's like, you're doing the same job a lieutenant's doing. He's like, no, you have no idea what I'm doing. And in the middle of COVID, when everybody was scared and trying to figure out what was going on next, worrying about their family, politics were in, like, the conversations, and we needed more leadership and more calm and more certainty. This dude, eyeing the door, knowing he was going to go to another department, needing a resume builder, was like full speed. And he destroyed our department. Destroyed it. And I remember in the first, I want to say it was first 2 months of his new plan, which took, he didn't just come up with it in a month. He'd taken the plan to a committee. The committee crapped all over it. And he was like, thanks for your time. I'm doing it anyway. I couldn't find a single leader in an organization at any level besides his chief of staff that had anything positive to say. And I'm pretty sure he was just towing the line. And I could see more so, like, and this is like, you got mirroring neurons where we tend to adopt people's feelings and moods, which is why if you've ever sat at a kitchen table and the conversation volume starts coming up by the end of the meal, everyone is loud. Like, we mirror each other. We do it with body language, we do it with tone, we do it with volume. And boy, do we do it with emotions, which is why leaderships need to act as the thermostat to either heat things up when things are too complacent or cool it down when it gets too hot. And within those first 2 months, we had 7 of those captains in our EAP program, our employee assistance program, for work-related burnout and stress, and never got an apology from that asshole. And he was fired, offered to resign, make sure I don't step on any legal landmines. He was given a chance to not come back to work in a way that benefited him best and left us in a lurch. And it's those kinds of things. I remember watching that. I remember going to some of the deputies and going, listen, I'm right in the thick of my dissertation. And what scares the hell out of me is I can't find one best practice in this plan. And what really, really bothers me is not only can I not find the best practice, what I do find is 50 examples of where these things are violating the best practices. And I know the impact of this stuff. And sure shit, it didn't play out that way. Like, it just broke my heart. So that's where, when you know, and it can be a gift, but when you know, it can also hurt and be a curse. And so I've had to also learn the dual-edged sword of, like, just because I'm asked a question doesn't mean they really want an answer too. And sometimes not speaking is as powerful as using my voice. And I'm still trying to figure it out because I'm a very passionate person, and that gets me in trouble, especially in areas I think I know something.
So building on this, because a lot of the answers you've had, they've touched a lot of different shores already, right? A lot of different places and that. And so Mike and I, we try really hard to get the stuff. There was an old theologian that said you want to get the hay out of the barn down on the floor where the cows can get at it. Because up here, they can look at it and go, oh, that's cool. That's interesting. Dang, I'm hungry. How do we get it down here? So yeah. Let's go to the actual applicable level. Just name a few challenges that you find are relevant to all departments, no matter size, location, membership makeup, what color you paint the trucks, whether there's 2 bathrooms or 5 or all the other things we argue about. But what are a few things as you've done your stuff that are relevant, and how does what you're doing apply to that?
So I'm going to tell you the things, and then you don't let me forget these, because my ADD will kick in. Communication is one. Recruitment and retention is another. And then I'm just going to say value. I'll just bookmark it with that. So I think the parallel is there's certain things you read in an IOS report, you're not going to be surprised. Like, accountability typically pops up, communication typically pops up, and it's no different. Like, when I travel, no matter the size, the makeup, the membership, all that stuff, communication is always a complaint. And so one of the things I try to help people understand is just how hard it is to actually have any kind of conversation because of what's happening in everybody's brains and going on. And knowing that fire chief can never write a perfect email, can never publish a perfect promotional list. But you're not perfect either. And, like, how you communicate to people and the strategies that you're using, which basically are what you've inherited, what you've watched other people do. Not a lot of leadership development, so you weren't usually taught these things. You're just doing basically like what your parents did. You're living their life until you can figure it out for yourself. So I can remember, like, as an example, as a company officer, I was told, don't be toxic around your people. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And they're like, don't complain down. Okay, that's fairly obvious. But don't let them get going. I was like, what do you mean? Like, don't let them vent. Like, because then it just breeds the negativity and toxicity. And I was like, okay. So I took that. The mistake I made was, as soon as a conversation at the kitchen table started getting negative as a company officer, I shut it down, which fixed the problem, right? No, they found a different kitchen table or a different part of the firehouse, and they had the same conversation. And then it didn't take long where I became part of that conversation. And I realized, looking back, just how much people needed to have a safe place to say, honestly, dumb stuff. Like, and so there's a cliche for that. If you ever said something and gone, I don't know why I said that out loud, it sounded better in my head. Well, there's a part of your brain that listens to your speech. There's a part of your brain that reads it or hears it out loud, and they're different. And so people need to be able to process what's happening around them, and they look to leaders to help them feel like not even better. Like it's just like a child. You remember the first time your kids fell down, like really fell down, and they looked to you or to mom, and if you had that look of horror on your face, kid starts crying. But they could fall down and hard, but if they looked at your face and you thought it was hilarious and you were smiling, they would be rubbing this, but they would be laughing and chuckling. They wouldn't at least go into a full-on tantrum. And that's firefighters, right? Like they're trying to make sense of what's being told to them, and they're trying to figure out what, and that kitchen table is where a lot of that happens. I call it the transformer. You get the high voltage message coming in from the admin, and you've got to step it down and then feed it in a way that it doesn't blow out all the sockets that all these little firefighters appliances are plugged in. And then you got to take their feedback and then step it back up and send it back to admin. And you've got to have a language that can transcend and make sense. Like just what you've described. It's got to be able to speak here and speak here, but it's really got to land here to both people. And I didn't have those tools. So that was 1.0. I can't even tell you what iteration of leadership that I'm on, but the communication piece, whether it's in writing, even if I show you the same piece of paper, you're going to walk away with a different message because we focus on the things that resonate with us. And that's a communication piece. And we could talk strategies all day long, but the piece of it is you are not saying what you think you're saying. Even if you recorded yourself and listened and you're like, there it is, I said the word, just like a courtroom would go, like, let's go back and look at the transcript and see what was said. There's this thing called meaning making where I'll say something and like you take your life experience and your values and your beliefs and you're trying to figure out what makes sense. And that's different than Mike. I mean, you guys are on two different coasts. And even as much as you agree and get along, that's where differences emerge. And so part of the humility of leadership is knowing like, I can't say anything just one time. Like I'm going to have to check in on people, especially if it's significant. And when something is going wrong, I want to get to it as fast as possible and just move along. But sometimes I need to sit with it, knowing I'm not going to say it perfectly if I'm emotional. And it's a little bit of cumbersome for me. It doesn't feel good. And I thought leadership was doing what I want to do when I want to do it. And it's like, no, that's part of the service piece is like, you've really got to put your wants and needs second. And so definitely communication, that's happening everywhere. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about, again, because it's the same brain, the communication struggles you have at that kitchen table are the same ones you're having at the back of the buggy on the command board, are the same ones you're having in the building, stretching the fire hose, trying to talk on the radio while you're supervising the rookie, all that stuff. Recruitment retention. They're obviously, it's like a string. It pull one side, you pull the other. So if you bump the starting salary up, you're going to get pay compression. So you're going to have a method for that. And if you give a raise to your incumbency, you're going to likely have to start the salary. And so surprisingly, I see a lot of organizations that don't understand that, or even company officers who don't understand the tit for tat. Like when I give here, like if I give Mike a compliment about how he performed on the fire ground, and then it's followed by a fist bump, and I give you the same verbatim compliment, but there's no fist bump, it's a completely different message. And depending on the security, and the confidence and the esteem of the person that's not getting the fist bump, I could have done some real damage. And I would never know unless I've created an environment where they feel safe to tell me. And I tell people all the time, I wouldn't want to be pushing down a hallway where the junior member's got the tick and they're looking at the ceiling going, man, that's 1,000 degrees. I should tell the lieutenant. But every time I tell him, he does what he wants to do anyway. And every time I tell him, he yells at me and retaliates. So no, screw him. I'm not going to say anything. Oh, we just pushed past a room that's on fire. No, he knows where he's going. And then we all get in trouble. But I absolutely know and have been part of teams that we have let leaders fail and it hurt us. Talking about cutting off your nose to spite your face, another cliche, because we wanted some sort of like justice for how that officer treated us back at the firehouse. And so those types of things impact recruitment and retention as much as anything. And if it matters, which I think it does, the greatest thing statistically that's going to walk somebody in your organization when you go to recruit is a hand that is outstretched, that is already inside the house. And talk to me about morale and tell me morale doesn't matter. Talk to me about engagement and tell me engagement doesn't matter. And wellness at work and burnout and those things. And people like, would you be surprised to know that right after we did that reorganization, our recruitment went down? Wonder why? And you talk to people like, I didn't recruit anybody for this process. And it was anything from like, screw it, to I care about the people I'm recruiting and I'm not going to invite them into this environment because it's not safe. It's not tenable. And it's like, I get it. And so it's like what we're talking about here matters on that piece. And so what I'm seeing culturally is a lot of it used to be that you came up, you had time on grade, and then you got your shot. Well, statistically, like people are trying things out now. They want to move. That's why they're not buying houses and they're renting. They don't want to own cars. They want to Uber. They want to experience experiences. And so when you show up with a 25-year pension, that's like getting married at 14. It's like, dude, you're taking options off the table for me. I don't want that. But you and I and Mike know, and you guys have got so much more experience than I do. This job is pretty freaking cool. And it's got so many things you never thought you'd end up doing. And it's like, so what's your strategy as an organization to connect those people to as many of those opportunities as possible, which has nothing to do with promoting them to leadership positions at 2, 3, 4 years. But it's like, how do you help them experience the different veins of different parts of our mission? And then how do you train your leaders to recognize the people that would do well in those things and help them fit and then get excited and then feed your recruitment? And so nationally, I see that we don't have a strategy for that. We will raise salaries. We will improve our benefits. We'll chase every other department. But I'll tell you, like, no matter what I do, the departments down the road can copy the same thing, except for one thing. It's the special sauce. It's the people. So when I do things that help people feel more engaged and feel like they want to come to work instead of using those annual leave or calling out sick, then I know we're winning. And I don't mind them taking time. That's not to say that I don't want them to be at home with their family when they need to be or off doing their hobbies. But really winning when they show up to work and an all-in engagement attitude, like that will ripple across to engagement. All right, so now the bookend. What was the last one? Help me remember. I said, oh, value. Yes. So see if this resonates with you guys. This is my season. We need to understand the difference between rock stars and superstars and treat them appropriately. And here's what I mean by that. I've worked with plenty of people, and I was maybe at one point one of these people, superstars who come, go, they shake stuff up, and they're gone. And they're off to the next thing. And it's a promotion or it's another opportunity. They'll come in 6 months, a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years. They make a lot of decisions. They make a lot of impact, and they're out of there, but they don't see the wake that they leave. And that's where the rock stars come in. Those senior men and women. And when I say senior, like I'm just going to say, I'm talking about maturity. People who have seen a thing or two, just like the Allstate commercials, they know a thing or two because they've seen a thing or two. And I know great senior firefighters with 6, 8 years on. And I know great senior firefighters that have got 30, 35 years on and everywhere in between. And those folks are the left to clean up and buffer the wake. That usually it's leaders that come in and go and leave. And a lot of times we'll treat rock stars like superstars. And I'll come like to Dugan and say, you'd make a great company officer. And Dugan's like, oh, that's not me. That's not my fit. Like I'm good. Number 2, number 3. Like I got your back. I'll be your floor sergeant. And it's like, no, you really got to put in promotion. And I keep chewing on him about that, almost to the point that I make him feel bad about it. Or I might have a transfer opportunity that's lateral. And I've seen people move laterally against their will and then they leave because they hate what they're doing. Or they buy into peer pressure, like classic would be like, Dugan, you got to put in because there's no way you want to work for the other Mike. So you got to put in because nobody else is putting in. And they hate it. And it doesn't just affect them at work, it affects them at home. And we mislabeled their value. We didn't see that it's perfectly acceptable and actually, I would think, necessary to have rock stars that are the foundation of what we have that allow the superstars to come in, shake things up, and then help us get to that next iteration of where the fire service needs to be. But the superstars can't do anything if they don't have launch pads, and those are the rock stars. And I struggle when I listen to people talk about senior firefighters as if their time has passed. And again, it's like what I said earlier, they are the most valuable they've ever been for you. And you got them out at stations where you don't got to see them and they're not running calls. And it's like, no wonder they're leaving. And they're taking all that institutional knowledge and experience with them. Or the younger members that have that same maturity are going and being rock stars and superstars elsewhere. And I think the only thing else that I'd add about that is we got to stop penalizing people for the seasons of their life. So you take that superstar, and this is where it hurt me. And then I started struggling at home, and I had counseling, and I needed to be here. So I started trying to disengage from stuff. And man, I've never felt the more like, what have you done for me lately? And it broke my heart. And I wasn't anywhere near the end of my career. I felt it early. And I was like, holy shit, this is, as soon as I'm not doing something for you, I don't matter. And I cared it so much that I really let that bother me. And sometimes it still bothers me, and I got to work through that. And so all of these things I think are germane to what's happening in every firehouse, no matter how many rigs you got in there and how many stations you got, and whether you're volunteers or whether you get paycheck every 2 weeks, or a combination of the two. Like, people are people. And ironically, I could go into FedEx. Like, one of my favorite conferences was for a compliance auditors association in Las Vegas. The only reason I put in for it because it was Las Vegas and it was a free trip. But they laughed at the same jokes. They got the same clowns with the same stories. It's just a different mission. And it's people. And I think the more we understand that, the better we do.
I think that's great. And, there's so much there to unpack. And really, the next question is very interesting because of that. In your writings and classes, you stress that leadership is too often overglorified in movies and books, and that the concept that leaders should have all the answers and tell everyone what to do all the time is dangerous and false. And I think that's true. And if that's the case, what do you think effective leaders look like, and how does the fire service get there?
So I'm gonna front load this with the science of why I know it's right. You can't argue this. A lot of it has to do with autonomy. 5 times a second, your brain is scanning for threats to status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And we never really grew up with that last one. If you've ever heard somebody say it's not fair, thank them. That's the seat of the fire. Focus on that kind of thing. Our We haven't been able to evolve because our amygdala is still looking for saber-toothed tigers in the bushes. It's looking for physical threats. And we do have work environments, unfortunately, that are not safe back at the firehouse. We've got toxic leaders, and we've got physical altercations and bad things. But for the most part, a lot of the things that rub people the wrong way and run them out of organizations or make their life difficult are like where I don't feel like I've got control over my career, the voluntold assignments, or I don't feel supported. And so when you tell someone this is what you should do, a couple things are happening. One, subconsciously your brain is lighting up like a Christmas tree. You can see it in MRIs. Danger. Like, because there's no control. Even if they will ultimately agree with it and thank you for it, that 1/1000th of a second, they're like, this feels like life and death, because your brain doesn't know the difference between a loaded gun and a document you're being asked to sign for that 1/1000th of a second. It's not until the other part of your brain, that prefrontal cortex, kicks in and makes sense of it for you. So by not giving people the opportunity to exercise autonomy, you're threatening them without even realizing it. But really, if I give you advice, Dugan, and you take it, you've got a different skill set than I do, I imagine. You're great at areas I'm not, and there may be some areas that I'm good at. And you take my plan, here's what you should do about this thing, because this is how I handled it, and you royally mess it up. You royally mess it up because you didn't have the relationship with the person that I had, or you didn't have the interpersonal skills I did, or you had something going on at home and it was affecting your ability to pay attention, or whatever it was. Who's to blame there? What lesson did you learn? Like, did you learn anything about what you could do differently next time, or are you just blaming me? And usually it's the latter. And so, like, I lose credibility with you, but really, like, it was always yours to do. Zig Ziglar says it this way: like, when you're the leader, when you're the boss, people are going to come into your office with a monkey on their back, and that's a problem. And they're going to take that monkey off the back, put it on the table, and say, we have a problem. We got to talk about this. And so your job is to talk about that. And when they leave, the monkey's on their back, not on your desk, because as soon as they leave, somebody else is going to show up, and it's another monkey, and you're going to end up being a zookeeper with monkey shit all over your desk instead of running an effective firehouse or effective fire department. And where I had seen this play out is like, I always love this story. I had to teach a guy how to apologize. He had run into a conflict. He came to me and he was like, I got to see this individual tomorrow. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to say to them. And I was like, all right, what do you want to do? And he's like, well, that's why I'm coming to you. You're supposed to tell me, you're the boss. And I was like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. And I didn't even know the science of this at the time. I was like, that just feels like a crappy thing to do. Is like, I'm not your dad. I'm not here to fix everything for you. You got to weigh in to wrestle. Son is what I should have said right after that. And so we talked, and I made him role play. I knew the other person. I acted like the other person. How long do you think it took, and how many takes do you think it took for a grown man in his mid 40s to apologize in a role play scenario, not even in the moment with the other person and all the emotions? And if your guess was any less than 45 minutes and 6 turns, you're wrong. And the very first one I'll never forget was like he got into this like method actor where he's like walking around and I'm sitting down on a bench trying to make it easy for him. And he's like, okay, all right, I'm gonna fix this. And he's like, all right, so I'll just make up a name. He's like, Matt, I owe you an apology. The other day you came in, I said some stuff I shouldn't have said, and I'm sorry for that. But in my defense, you were being a real asshole. And I was like, stop, that's not an apology. Um, and and in full disclosure, I had every intention of being up early, basically peering around the corner, making sure that if he got in the deep end, I could come bail him out. Because I had already gotten like feedback from that guy's lieutenant that like he wanted to report out for me, and he was the senior lieutenant. I wanted his respect, and I wanted him to know I was going to do a good job. So I wanted to know how I was going to go. So we were going to have a conversation either way. And I was up all night because we run medics transport units here. I was up all night. I slept in, which meant I got like 45 minutes of sleep. And as I'm packing up my stuff, the guy that I had the conversation with runs over, gives me a shit-eating grin and a thumbs up, and then hightails it out of there. Doesn't even tell me what's happened. And I walk into the lieutenant, and I was like, hey, I talked with my guy. I just got a thumbs up. I'm not entirely sure exactly what's happened, but I promised you a conversation today. You gave me 24 hours to think about it, which I appreciate that. So let's talk. And he's like, we're good. And I was like, no, seriously. Like, I want to earn your respect. I want to talk about it with you. Here's my bearings on this. Here's what I did. I want your feedback. He's like, we're good. And I was like, I'm a little confused. And I really want to tell you what I did because are we good because you're proud of me? Or are you good because you think I'm a lost cause? And he's like, I never would have imagined that your guy would have apologized successfully to my guy. And where I'm really struggling for words is that he apologized to me as well. And he told me he appreciated me sticking up for my guy and bringing it to like my attention as the officer and forcing that conversation with him. And he was going to try to do better. And he's like, you did a good job with that, Ben. I was like, I didn't do that. That wasn't me. The front half of the apology was, but not you. I didn't even think about that. And I think one of the best things we can do, and the reason I'm sharing the story is you got to let people show up for themselves, man. Like I would never want to work for either of you if we stretched hose lines and every time we got to the seat of the fire, you took the nozzle from me and you put out the fire. So why are you going to do that in my interpersonal stuff? Like you got to let me grow up, let me make mistakes, let me learn and feel emotionally tagged. I did that. I can see direct cause and effect, and I may not see it in the moment. And that's why I circle back. We have a relationship. But that's what mentoring is. Like I can share how I might approach with you, but I should never tell you exactly what to do. This is how you should love your wife because this is how I love mine. It's like, no, like we got some commonality between those two marriages, but no, that's not exactly what we should do. So that's what I mean by, and like what's fun to watch is somebody like Chris Voss, who's if you've never read his book, Never Split the Difference, highly recommend it. It's about hostage negotiation, but damn if that isn't applicable to the negotiation we have in conversations about the meaning of things. And he talks about getting to the no and letting people, he's like, and the reason he leads with like the no question. So he won't say, do you have time to talk about this right now? Because he's actually wanting to have the conversation, but he doesn't want them to say yes, because it feels good to say no. Like, just like you're a kid, I remember the first time my kids wouldn't go to bed on time. No. And it was like, but it felt good for them. What he would say is something to the effect of, have you given up talking about this? And the other person's naturally going to say no. And so they feel like they're in control, but really it's your influence that's causing this moment to happen. And man, that's a trick. Like there's a reason he's one of the best in the world. Like this is the leadership kind of training that you got to do. So anyway, like that's the science piece of it. Like where it really dawned on me is we had interpersonal conflict where I was in the training section. like a crisis where a training prop, a massive training prop, SCBA pallet confidence maze, about 3,000 square feet, was inadvertently cleaned up because my boss forgot to tell me that we were losing the building. And I had 2 days before the recruits were coming over to use said maze. And I can remember walking in the room, not finding a splinter of wood like the Grinch that stole the SCBA pallet maze, not even a poor dead end for poor Cindy Lou. And it's like, oh crap, what do we do? And so my brain is racking about like, I've got to fix this. They're looking to me to fix this. I got to have a plan. And I'm literally picturing what would Mel Gibson do in Braveheart here, where he's trying to rally the thousands of troops, which by the way, somehow even the ones in the back can hear what he's saying, which obviously doesn't happen. And I can't tell you what I did or didn't do because I never got the chance to do it. The instructors rallied around me, not in spite of me. They set their own plan in motion and solved it beautifully and better than what I would have done because they had relationships with people in the field that found another building. And they had relationships with the field who helped them go load up pallets from the beer distributor where they got the pallets from. And they had maintained the relationships themselves, not me, themselves with the beer distributor to get the same pallets at the same time. And by Monday morning, less than 48 hours later, we had a 3,500 square foot SCBA pallet maze. And I had nothing to do with that. And it really bothered me. It really bothered me. And I even told them, I was like, I really wanted to be part of this. And obviously I swung a hammer and I worked the weekend and the nights just like they did. I wasn't going to let them put that sweat canoe in without me. But what I realized from talking with them was the first time they did it, there was some conflict that they had overstepped. And the captain that came, and I was a lieutenant at the time, instead of busting their balls and flexing his badge and his collar, yielded. And he was like, you guys definitely overstepped on this, but this is freaking awesome. And this helps the department. And I want more people to have the courage to do what you did. And I know they remembered that, not necessarily even the words, but I remember the words. They remember feeling the pride in providing that kind of value. And there was no way they were going to fail. And the only thing that I could do in that moment when we found out that maze was gone, honestly, I think in my opinion, was fuck it up. Pardon the language, edit that out. Sorry, was to mess it up. And thankfully I didn't. And so I really believe that, and I'm not advocating, like, you got to talk to people, you got to weigh in. Like, there's going to be times where you got to direct people, but you will know those people. The rookie's not the one that I'm going to give an unlimited amount of autonomy. I'm talking about those rock stars, and you give more leash to the superstars, but you always have a tether to that. And whether, like, just like we're doing a search rope or a dive exercise with tugs, like, you got to have a connection where you can feel that there's panic on the other side of that, or you haven't felt anything in a long time. And you better go down there and check out and see that they haven't gotten in the deep end and see what they're drowning. But I really think the more you put people in the moment and let them wrestle, the more you'll have to coach them on when they get done. And that starts with having an environment where people feel safe to lose. I don't want to lose. I love to win. I freaking hate losing. But we're not afraid to try and fail and learn from that. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, great, man, great stuff. I wish we could have like 5 hours to just dig into everything. So unfortunately, we've got about 10 minutes. So let's finish with this question. What lesson has had the greatest impact on your leadership journey, and how did you learn it? The greatest impact. I know there's probably 100. Pick the one that's jumping to the front of your frontal cortex.
Let me think about this. So if I said like the positive moment that had the greatest impact, I think it's honestly the story that I just shared with you guys about that maze and about what that captain did and yielding when he was in a position of authority and power. But honestly, I think the moment that had the most significant, where I was like fully going this way, and then all of a sudden had to come this way and go the exact opposite, was the situation I described to you where I failed that guy. Where, and let me elaborate a little bit more on that so that weighs in. When we were in that room, which was supposed to be the 30-minute conversation, and the yelling started, the employee got up and left. Didn't ask permission, just vamoosed, vacated. And we couldn't find him. And I knew he was a Marine. and I started checking the station cameras. I was worried that he was going to do something, bad, either to us or himself. And thankfully, it didn't go that way. But that was a very real, oh crap, this just really, really got heavy. And where he was in the bathroom, dry heaving, throwing up, snot on his shirt, crying, broken. And I remember it took us like 10 minutes to find him. And the battalion chief was encouraging me, is what I'm going to phrase this, to get them back in the room. My captain knew the employee. He was his first lieutenant when he got hired. So I had a relationship. I didn't know that. That was a lot of the problems I had, is he was basically subverting my authority and condoning things he should have condoned. So he found him in the bathroom, and I can remember watching down the hallway after I said, hey, Chief wants us back in here to finish this, knowing we're already at 45 minutes and we're supposed to only go 30. I can remember hearing them, and the captain's telling the firefighter, you got to go in there and take the medicine. You got to go in there and take the medicine. You got to go in there and take the medicine. And he's holding him up. And when I talk about intoxicated leadership, like if you've ever had a friend who was trying to do something dumb when he was drunk, and you're got almost pinned against the wall, and you're like, don't go home with her. Don't try to fight him. Don't say that thing you're going to say. Like, that's what, it's eerily familiar to me. That's what it felt like. And I say that because I was a bouncer and a bartender for a number of years. I've seen a lot of these patterns. And he marches right back in here, and you can see his eyes swollen shut. You can see the snot on his shirt. Like, this dude is done. And I wish that I could go back in time when the chief said, all right, we're gonna resume this. Go ahead, Lieutenant Martin. And go, no, we're not. Like, respectfully, no. Like, that fire is too big. We can't send anybody in there, kind of equivalent. Like, it's a bad strategy to continue attacking this. Like, let's figure out how to get this guy home. And then we're going to figure out with us as his leaders how to have a better, more fruitful conversation. But I didn't. I got my metaphorical popcorn on the table, started eating it. And I can remember thinking something to the effect of, good, you've been a pain in my ass for 3-4 months now. You have character assassinated me. You have turned the guys against me. I don't think I'm going to be able to stay and lead this crew because of the things you've done. And I totally leaned into that feeling of like, you deserve everything you have coming to you. And an hour and a half, 2 hours later, we're still in there, still screaming, and thinking about the effect, because I hadn't had marriage counseling yet. And knowing the guy was going through divorce and thinking about the pain that I caused him. And the takeaway lesson for me there was, you, like, when you get this promotion, like, let me back up. When you swear in, whether you're a volunteer or professional, you're given resources that you're entrusted with by the public, the rigs, the uniforms, the firehouses. You take care of those. That's you as a steward. And then you guys know the next part. When you get promoted to a ranked position and you're leading from a formal position, like, you're given the most valuable resource and you're asked to take care of it. And I did everything I could to keep those guys safe on the fire ground. And I missed the opportunity to do the same thing in the firehouse. And this was that moment of, I needed to be a steward for him and put my interest and my pain second to his. And I didn't. I was all in on me. And so, like, when we talk about that, is like, what moment sent you in a different direction? Man, that's it. I never wanted anybody to experience anything like that. And that's what birthed the intoxicated leadership class. And ironically enough, the first person who previewed that class was that battalion chief, who was a fire and brimstone. And I remember them like yelling at each other and thinking, like, God, I'm glad he's not yelling at me like that. Because we did have a relationship, and he did chew on me some, but it was largely the other guy. And I remember talking to him, and I was like, hey, I need a favor. I need you to listen to this. Because it's only about an hour long, and now it could be a 2, 3, 4 day class with everything I've researched and studied and lived. And I was like, and I want you to keep an open mind that I think we could have done better for that guy. And at the end of it, he told me, he's like, I wish I knew some of this stuff. He's like, you should teach it. And that is what it is. Like, and that's literally what it came from. And it was like we were all drunk. That's what I told him. And that's where intoxicated leadership came from. So I appreciate you guys asking those questions, because obviously, like, it still hurts to talk about it, and it's been almost 13 years now. It's been it still hurts.
Okay.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to kind of end it, because I think we're going to leave our listeners and our viewers with some emotions to unpack. But I would like to ask you to tell people where they could get a hold of you if they want to dig deeper into this, or have you come talk to their people about this leadership and the intoxicated leadership and all that.
And isn't that the best part as a speaker, is getting to make those connections and go out and share the message. And so thank you, Mike, for asking that.
And the other thing is, just before, is to stop someone else from making the same mistakes that you have. As my mentor said to me, a wise man learns from his mistakes. A wiser man learns from the mistakes of others. And
Amen.
I just think it's so important, because we have all made mistakes. And anybody in the fire service who tells you they never have made a mistake is either an idiot or a complete liar.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, get your butt to Indy so you can see these other two guys and catch the class there. Because honestly, like, catching the speakers in the hallways is where this started for me, and getting to put a face with a name. And God, the person who wrote the article, I can remember the first time sitting in somebody's class and seeing them live and being like, oh, this is amazing. And so if it's not there, I'm at most major fire conferences. But to your point, go to the website, please. EmbraceResistance.com. You can fill out a form. My email address is there. I'd love to come talk in your class. But the podcast, I'll put links to stuff like this, the articles I've written. And we're talking about the real talk piece of this is, I don't touch it up. I was asked about this a number of years ago. Like, as you learn more, do you go back and take stuff down? I'm like, no, because my vantage point is here, and I got here by climbing these rungs. And I feel like it would be doing a disservice to go back and sound really smarter than I am at the time. So I've left everything there, all the mistakes, so people can read. And that's why there's no learning objectives for the class, is because you're going to come and hear the message and get a different message for everybody in the room based on where you are and what you got going on. So so that's it. And I'd love to connect and hopefully get a chance to chat about what's going on in everybody's lives.
We are at an hour and 10 and a little bit. So thank you very much. And to our brothers and sisters out there listening, thank you. We wish you a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. And I hope you have a new year filled with family, joy, love, and all of that stuff. And I think Mike is back on. We lost him for a minute, but to all of our people who give us the gift of their time, I wish you the best of your holiday season. God bless you.
Yeah, hey, man, I'm sorry, I'm having some computer issues, but great job, dude. I'm glad we're friends. Glad to see you leaning into some. This is some difficult and challenging territory to chew on, right? This isn't just, hey, it's fun to put water on the fire, and man, it's fun to rescue people. And you were talking about you're going to spend a lot of your time in these type of communications. You're going to spend the majority of your fire service career not putting out fires, just trying to figure out how to get along with fellow brothers and sisters. And so I just want you to know, just your tone, your tenor, I am well aware behind the scenes, the amount of time, effort, and energy you put in. Brother, I'm glad we're friends. I'm glad we're on this ride together. So thanks for hanging out, dude.
Thank you guys so much. Humbled, honored, and just really loved our time together. I wish you guys had talked more, but maybe again next time.
Next time. We'll have more time next time. So, gang, on behalf of Mike and I and Ben and Mark Haw and all the folks who are putting this together, I'm sure you're going to enjoy listening to that. And my hope is you'll reach out to Ben. On behalf of Mike and I and all the team at Fire Engineering, we hope you have blessed holidays. You get family time. You go put out some fires when you're not doing that. And we're looking forward to seeing you again in 2025, Michael. Damn. 2025. We'll see you again for another episode of the Mikey G and Mikey D show. God bless.
In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, the TheFireStore has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Carnes for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit thefirestore.com today. The TheFireStore, your trusted safety partner.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatefabrics.com/Flex 7.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with Magnegrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit